Hi Year 10, here we are again and we're ready to go with our next lesson, which is for Tuesday the 2nd of February, period 3. So period 3 is at 10:40 to 11:40, so you should be doing it round about that time. I also want to tell you that I'm going to do another live lesson on Friday's lesson, Friday period 2. I'm going to do a live lesson, so I'll let you know that on Firefly. I did do a live lesson last week, but not many people turned up, which is a bit of a pain. So I did this fantastic lesson for about 6 people. So I'm going to try another one, see if we can get a few more people to come along and see if you prefer doing that rather than this video type lesson. I did ask people the other day and some said they preferred this and some said they preferred the live lesson, so I want to see what everyone thinks. Anyway, this one's going to be quite a simple topic, I think. I think we've covered it a little bit before, but I'm going to go into a bit more detail. And what we're basically doing today is blood cells, platelets and plasma. Alright, so for today you're going to need your exercise book, pens and papers, any revision guides that you have, any nice colours that you've got, and I'd like you to make that title please. Blood cells, platelets and plasma. Write it down, underline it, preferably with a different colour pen, certainly with a ruler. And of course don't forget, you can always pause it if I'm going too quick now. So, blood cells. We're going to start off with red blood cells. So if you can just write down red blood cells. Don't have to write this long word, but this is the posh word for them, just in case it comes up in the exam and you think, oh my god, Mr. Arnold never told us anything about that. Erythrocytes. But basically red blood cells, and the thing we need to know about them is that they carry oxygen. We know that already. You know that. And why is it important that they carry oxygen? Because we need to get that oxygen to the working muscles, all to do with the same topic that we've just done, the things about vasodilation, vasoconstriction and blood shunting, vascular shunting, getting the blood to the parts of the body that need it the most. Alright, so we know that red blood cells carry oxygen. I'd also like you to just be aware of Kenyan athletes who have a very high red blood cell count, and that's to do with their altitude training. If you have a low red blood cell count, this is called anemia. Bit of a tricky word, but you've probably heard about it. So lots of red blood cells, Kenyans are good examples, not very many red blood cells, can lead to anemia, and that means a lack of energy. You're going to have a real lack of energy. Alright, so just a few little things to think of. I hope you've taken those down. What are the other sorts of blood cells we've got? I'm asking you. I can hear you shouting. Well done. Maria C, you shouting out? Yes, you know it from science. White blood cells. And their posh word is leukocytes. Don't have to know that, but just be aware, just in case in the exam. Alright, so we've got red blood cells, we've just talked about, oxygen in those. We've got white blood cells here. What's the main thing about white blood cells? They're the defense system of our body. They destroy pathogens. Alright, they fight infections. So that's the big thing we want to know about white blood cells. They fight infection. Perhaps I should write that down here somewhere. In fact, can I do that now? Here we go. Fight infection. Alright, so they fight infection and they destroy pathogens. That's the big word. That's good stuff. Alright, really important. White blood cells. So take that down, please. Right, I'm going to try and put these. I've got a few clips here and here about Mo Farah and altitude training in Kenya. Alright, so I'm going to put these little videos on after my video, and I would suggest that at this point you now pause this video and go down on Firefly and have a look at these videos and just learn a little bit about how they train these long distance runners in Kenya. Alright, and in fact I will just talk a little bit about that at the moment. So the reason, in fact I might as well go big screen here, the reason that the runners go to Kenya to train, or they go somewhere, it doesn't have to be Kenya, but anywhere in the world where there's high altitude. Can anyone think why on earth would they do that? Any ideas? Jardel, probably got an idea. Chanel? All right. Well, they go to these high altitude areas because the air is a little bit different there. So the higher up you are in the world, so at these top of these, well, it's not like at the top of a mountain, but they're higher than we are in our country here because of the hills. The altitude is higher. The actual air that they breathe in has less oxygen in it. So what does that actually do to the athletes immediately? What's that going to make it? How's that going to make them feel when they're training if there's less oxygen in the air for them to breathe into their system? Yeah, that's right. It's going to make it much harder for them to cope. So you might think, well, why are they going to go training where it's harder for them? Aha. Well, the reason is because it is harder, their body has to adapt. So they have to train their body to get used to having less oxygen in the air. And it doesn't happen overnight, but over a period of weeks and then months, their bodies get used to training with less oxygen in the air. And their body's such a clever thing that they develop a system where they increase the red blood cells in their body because they need more oxygen because there's less of it coming in through the air. So that's a pretty basic concept. Less oxygen in the air, body adapts, you build up more red blood cells, and then you're at the level that you were at the start. But the secret is, once you then come down from that high altitude, maybe you come down to train or to race in the Olympics, suddenly you find it much easier to train and run at a lower altitude because you've got all this extra oxygen in your body, all in the red blood cells. You've got more and more red blood cells because you needed it for altitude. But down now at normal altitude, you suddenly got more than you need. You've got this extra boost. It's like having a little bit of a drug injected into you. It's a bit like blood doping. You've got more oxygen in your blood. But it's all legal. It's allowed. So the athletes do it. They come down from their altitude training just before an important race like the Olympics, and they find that they've got this real boost in their system of more oxygen because they've got more red blood cells. So that is altitude training in a nutshell, and that's why lots of athletes try and train long distance runners. They try and train at high altitude. Could be a long distance cyclist as well, the Tour de France. But they try and train at altitude to build up red blood cells so when they come back down to normal level, they've got a boost of energy. All right, I hope that's clear. I'm going to go back to small bits now. And the next slide is on platelets. So we've had red blood cells, we've had white blood cells, and now we're on to platelets. And we know a little bit about platelets already because they are essential for the clotting of the blood. All right? You know that. They've helped form scabs. They help stop the bleeding, basically, if you get a little cut. And the reason that that is so important and the reason they like it in the exam is so that you can continue with your exercise. So the example they often give in the exam is a boxer. He might get a little cut above his eye. Okay, and they'll put bandages on it and they'll put cream or Vaseline on it to try and stop it bleeding, and gradually they'll hope that the platelets will form very quickly and just form a little scab on it, and that will enable the boxer to carry on boxing in the bout. Now obviously if it's gushing out he won't be able to carry on, but a small cut, it will clot and it will enable the athlete, the boxer, the runner, the footballer to carry on. You sometimes see footballers. I saw Thiago the other day playing for Liverpool, got a cut on the head, and they put a great big bandage all around his head, excuse me, and within about 5 minutes he was back on the pitch, okay, because with the bandage on it and the platelets clotting the cut, it meant he could carry on. So that's why it's so important. And then we go on to plasma, and plasma is the one that normally people forget all about. All right, so plasma it's a pale straw-coloured liquid. It's mostly water. You don't really need to know much about that. The thing you do need to know is this: it helps maintain circulation between the cells and the tissues. That is what you need to know. That is really important. And again, maybe I should highlight that to make sure that everyone knows that that is the important bit. Okay, so I'll do that. Maybe even if I do it in black, it might come up a bit clearer here. So, doesn't seem to be working, but I've underlined it anyway. And it's important in sport because without it, oxygen can't get to where it's meant to go, to the working muscles. And it's also important because carbon dioxide dissolves in plasma, and you know that we need to get rid of all the carbon dioxide. So that is so important here. So basically today's lesson is about red blood cells carry oxygen, white blood cells fight infection, fight pathogens, platelets help the blood clot, plasma helps maintain the circulation between cells and tissues. That's what you need to know. You also need to know a little bit about altitude training, and I'm going to set you a question on altitude training after this. Now, just before we end, I want to do a live lesson again on Friday. So it's going to be Friday, the 5th of February, period 2, and I want as many people as possible to try and get to that lesson. All right? So I expect this lesson, the video's now on 12.5 minutes. I would think the question will probably take you 15-20 minutes at most to do. So that's probably going to be well within 40 minutes, I would guess. Watching the video, doing the work, taking your notes. Maybe a bit longer if you're a slower writer, but shouldn't take you more than 1 hour. Possibly if you're watching the other videos that might take a few minutes, but I don't expect it to take more than an hour. Alright, so I hope everyone's okay. Please do the work. Please upload your answer to Firefly so I can see it. Thank you ever so much. Keep safe, keep exercising. See you on Friday. Thank you. So long. Au revoir.